King Arthur is one of the oldest and most enduring themes in European medieval mythology. The earliest tales and legends emerged over 1,000 years ago. Songs, myths, stories, romances, you name it, the list goes on. And, of course, movies. The Arthurian legend, like any ancient cycle, is unique because every era reinterprets the source material in its own way, turning the myth into a mirror of its time. Medieval romances crafted an ideal of courtly love and chivalric honor. In the 15th century, Thomas Malory wove scattered stories into a single epic, Morte d'Arthur. The Victorians, especially Tennyson with his Idylls of the King, transformed the legend into a parable of duty and honor. But in the 20th century, authors started asking tougher questions about power, betrayal, and the cost of ideals. In this video, I want to trace how cinema, over more than a century, has interpreted and reimagined the Arthurian legend. The story of King Arthur in cinema kicked off with silent films. In 1904, a short film called Parsifal hit the screens, shot, by the way, in the USA, pretty surprising since the French were the big players in early cinema. Then, in 1917, we got Knights of the Round Table, another short. These early adaptations were naive and theatrical, staged like living paintings, but they set the foundation for the genre's visual style: staged castles, cardboard swords, knightly tournaments, and, of course, the essential figure of Merlin the Wizard. In the 30s and 40s, Arthurian tales nearly vanished from the screen. Hollywood was obsessed with gangsters, musicals, and war dramas. The Middle Ages just felt too old-fashioned for the Jazz Age and wartime audiences. The genre made a comeback in the early 50s. Knights of the Round Table from 1953, starring Robert Taylor and Ava Gardner, set the Hollywood standard for Arthurian tales for decades to come: lavish costumes, heroic grandeur, and a simplified moral code. This was Arthur as an adventure blockbuster, a fairy tale for the masses in the same vein as Robin Hood flicks. Camelot in 1967 brought Broadway flair and a deeper, more psychological take on power. Here, Arthur, played by Richard Harris, wasn't a flawless hero, but a man torn between his duty as king and his personal desires. The love triangle of Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot wasn't just a romantic subplot, it was a tragedy that shattered the dream of a perfect kingdom. But the real turning point for the Arthurian legend came in the 70s. The era of counterculture and questioning traditional values couldn't leave the story of King Arthur untouched. And the first blow was struck by the British comedy troupe Monty Python.
You killed 8 wedding guests and all?
Well, you see, the thing is, I thought your son was a lady.
I can understand that. Hurry, Sir Lancelot! Hurry! Shut up! You only killed the bride's father, that's all.
Well, I really didn't mean to.
Didn't mean to? You put your sword right through his head.
Oh, dear. Is he all right?
Monty Python and the Holy Grail. The 1975 comedy from the legendary British comedy troupe Monty Python. Set in 10th century England, the story follows King Arthur, the mythical king of the Britons, as he gathers his Knights of the Round Table to embark on a sacred quest given by God himself to find the Holy Grail. Sure, an absurd comedy might not exactly be historical or even fantasy cinema, but when it comes to the detailed world building and medieval setting, few can rival this cult classic from the British comedians. The knight's armor, though slightly exaggerated, still looks impressive even by today's standards. The costumes of ordinary villagers are top-notch too, and the entire setting, while deliberately over the top, feels remarkably authentic. Not many modern films in historical settings can match this level of period detail. Now, the behavior of the characters in this world? Completely unhinged from reality, but that's the backbone of half the humor. The battles, for obvious reasons, are exaggerated too. Yet, despite all that, this is genuinely a brilliantly crafted film, and its final showdown could make most modern blockbusters jealous. Holy Grail showed that you could do anything with the Arthurian legend, even turn it into an absurdist farce. But just 6 years later, another British director proved the opposite. The legend could be brought back to its mythological roots, made serious, dark, and mystical. John Berman took on the most ambitious Arthurian adaptation since the golden age of Hollywood.
You're right. I'm not yet a knight. You, Arians, will knight me. Then at night tonight, I can't offer you mercy.
Excalibur, one of the first relatively modern takes on the Arthurian legend. Released in 1981, it comes with all the quirks that might challenge today's viewers. Watching it now can be tough. It's both incredibly charming and atmospheric, yet at times silly and naive, but so wonderfully cozy. And sadly, it drags a bit by the middle. This is subjective, of course, but the first half flies by almost unnoticed, while getting through to the end feels like more of a slog. The film stays fairly close to the original Arthurian source material. Its timeline spans from events before Arthur's birth to his rise as king and his reign in its prime. The filmmakers worked with a budget of $11 million, which, for a sprawling fantasy epic at the time, was pretty modest. For comparison, Rambo: First Blood, released a year later, cost $15 million. George Lucas had the same $11 million for Star Wars in 1977, but its sequel in 1980 ran up a budget of $18 to $20 million. Speaking of Star Wars, Arthur in Excalibur feels strikingly like Luke Skywalker, and Merlin gives off strong Obi-Wan vibes. Excalibur won a Special Artistic Achievement Award at the Cannes Film Festival and was nominated for an Oscar for Best Cinematography. Here's a fun fact. Excalibur was made instead of a Lord of the Rings adaptation, using early drafts from that scrapped Tolkien project. Another cool tidbit, Excalibur marked Liam Neeson's big screen debut, and during filming, he met his future wife, Oscar-winning actress Helen Mirren, who played Morgana. This project was also one of her first major roles. As for Arthur himself, he was brought to life by British actor Nigel Terry. The 80s were a time when the Arthurian legend started creeping into the most unexpected cinematic traditions. While Excalibur set a new standard for serious fantasy in the West, the Soviet Union took a completely different approach to the legend. In 1988, a film adaptation of Mark Twain's novel, a work that was itself a satire of chivalric romances, hit the screens. Soviet filmmakers crafted something truly unique, a philosophical parable dressed in the garb of Arthuriana.
Я узнаю сэра Галлахара. Судя по гербу, это герб сэра Кея. Сэр Борс. А я узнаю вас, сэр. И вас. Я узнаю рыцарь вас. Я узнаю самую прекрасную из всех королев. Королеву Гиневру.
The New Adventures of a Yankee in King Arthur's Court, a 1988 Soviet film based on Mark Twain's A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. It's tough to sum up this movie in just a couple of paragraphs. It's a one-of-a-kind work. The plot follows an American pilot who, by some inexplicable twist, ends up in medieval England, where adventures, intrigue, battles, love, and all sorts of troubles await him. This is a very leisurely film. Long takes, slow camera pans, measured dialogues, and monologues that stretch on for minutes. For example, there's a 3-minute scene where the characters simply drink from each other's hands. But it's shot so beautifully in slow motion, set to goosebump-inducing music, that you can't help but savor the moment. A quick word about the soundtrack. It's stunning at times. Epic, powerful compositions give way to light, playful melodies, shifting the film's mood in an instant. Another standout is the costumes and set design, crafted with incredible care and attention to detail, plus the sheer scale of some scenes. The film uses massive crowds of extras. In this Soviet take on Twain's story, King Arthur is played by Albert Filizov, while the lead role, the American from the future, goes to Sergei Koltikov, but there are some serious flaws. The plot is incredibly disjointed, and at times, it's nearly impossible to follow what's happening on screen. Scenes jump back and forth, often without any clear logic. Figuring out what's real, what's a dream, or what's even going on is a lost cause. But if you can let go of trying to make sense of it all and just immerse yourself in the film's atmosphere, it's absolutely mesmerizing. The 90s opened a new chapter for the Arthurian legend on screen. The era of big budgets, computer graphics, and A-list actors swept into the world of medieval myths. Hollywood returned to Arthur with a kind of grandeur typical of the blockbuster age. In 1995, First Night hit theaters, a film that tried to blend the classic Hollywood approach with a more mature take on the timeless love triangle of Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot.
Even the lives of strangers. If you must die, die serving something greater than yourself. Better still, live and serve.
The Round Table.
Yes.
First Night, a fun adventure melodrama from 1995. Surprisingly, it's one of the films that stays truest to the spirit of the original Arthurian tales. At the heart of the story is Lancelot, a brave hero who rescues and falls hopelessly in love with King Arthur's beautiful fiancée, Guinevere of Lyonesse. Thanks to his skill and courage, he joins the king's service just as Sir Maleagant, a former knight of the Round Table, plots to destroy Arthur and seize Camelot. The film is visually stunning, with plenty of authentic sets, armor, and costumes, capturing the medieval vibe pretty well, albeit a bit exaggerated at times. Beyond that, the movie boasts an impressive cast: Oscar winner Sean Connery as King Arthur, Richard Gere as Lancelot, and Julia Ormond as Lady Guinevere. It was directed by Jerry Zucker, the filmmaker behind Ghost, with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. The movie didn't exactly light up the box office, earning just $128 million against a $75 million budget. Personally, I'd say it's a pleasant film with a few standout scenes, but overall fairly average, though I'd still recommend giving it a watch.
I undertake one other important mission in my name. Do you feel worthy enough to accept it?
Me, sir?
Yes. You are going to help me with the Lady Eileen.
Prince Valiant. In the 90s, Arthurian tales kept evolving in all sorts of directions, from serious adaptations to lighter, adventure-packed films. This 1997 European movie, a joint effort by Irish, German, and British filmmakers, is a great example. If it were for the overly cartoonish villain and a couple of painfully childish moments, this could have been a truly awesome film. Even so, it's pretty solid and fun. There's drama, there's adventure, and the characters are really well crafted. The main hero, Valiant, really steals the show. Played by Stephen Moyer, Valiant is a squire to Sir Gawain who takes on absurd but brutal and ruthless Vikings who've kidnapped a beautiful princess and Excalibur, the symbol of the king's power. Moyer's so charming, perfectly capturing a brave, noble, and kind-hearted guy that you can't help but root for him from the very first minute. And aging King Arthur is played by Edward Fox. Sadly, Arthur's role in the story is pretty small, but he feels a lot like Dumbledore from Harry Potter, a quirky wise man handing out quests to the hero. The cast also includes Ron Perlman and Warwick Davis. It's a fun movie, though it's got plenty of flaws, and even some of the actors involved have spoken negatively about it. The new millennium ushered in a trend of historical realism in cinema. Ridley Scott's Gladiator in 2000 showed that audiences were ready for grittier, more brutal, and historically grounded takes on legendary tales. The Lord of the Rings proved the commercial viability of epic fantasy. And in 2004, producer Jerry Bruckheimer decided to reimagine the legend of King Arthur through the lens of historical accuracy. Instead of Merlin's magic and the romance of Camelot, viewers got the gritty, bloody reality of the 5th century.
So Rome is leaving. The Saxon is come. The world we have known and fought for is ended. Now we must make a new world.
Your world, Merlin, not mine. I shall be in Rome.
King Arthur, a stellar historical film from 2004 with Clive Owen as Arthur and the stunning Keira Knightley as Guinevere. This movie strays from most literary sources, telling the Arthurian tale as it might have played out in reality. The filmmakers bring the 5th century AD to life. The main characters are Sarmatian warriors serving the Romans in Britain, led by Lucius Artorius Castus, or simply Arthur, the historical figure who inspired the legendary king. Disillusioned with Rome, Arthur and his knights, driven by noble ideals, join forces with the Britons to fight against the Saxons. The film stands out for its high level of realism, which is captivating. The historical setting is portrayed almost flawlessly. The armor, costumes, and everyday life are strikingly authentic. The direction doesn't disappoint either, especially in the battle scenes, packed with massive crowds of extras and cameras mounted right on the weapons. The only slight hiccup is that the characters' behavior doesn't always match the historical era, but that's forgivable. It's a blockbuster after all. The movie was originally set to be directed by Michael Bay, but he walked away, finding the $120 million budget too small for such an ambitious project. So Antoine Fuqua stepped into the director's chair. Let me be clear, King Arthur from 2004 is the best film about the legendary ruler. In 2006, another realistic take on the Arthurian legend hit the screens, The Last Legion. The film was a massive flop, low ratings, bad reviews, and a box office disaster. Considering that King Arthur from 2004 wasn't a huge hit either, it seemed like Arthuriana, especially in a realistic setting, could be shelved for a long time. After that, a long lull set in. For over a decade, Arthurian tales were almost absent from major cinema. Hollywood was caught up in superhero franchises and reimaginings of classic fairy tales. But the legend of King Arthur is too powerful to be forgotten for long. In the mid-2010s, several studios started developing Arthurian projects. The first to break through was Guy Ritchie with his radically reimagined take on the legend.
Not only did you survive in the gutter, you've blossomed out of the manure.
You've got the wrong man, sire. I was born in a brothel on a bridge in Londinium.
The sword can only be drawn by Uther Pendragon or his direct heir.
King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, one of the most polarizing films about the famous English hero. Directed by Guy Ritchie, this adaptation carries his signature style in spades. As a result, Arthur here barely resembles the high-minded knight of legend. The future king grows up on the gritty streets of Londinium, raised by prostitutes in a local brothel, which heavily shapes his character. That said, he's far from lacking in honor or nobility. Charlie Hunnam takes the lead and absolutely shines in the role. Jude Law plays the villain, and he's equally compelling. The rest of the cast, though, feels like they're just passing through. The film is packed with brilliantly staged, mesmerizing scenes, but the story can feel disjointed, with things you'd want more of getting maybe 5 minutes of screen time. The magic, too, feels almost out of place. This grand 2017 film was meant to kick off a sprawling fantasy cinematic universe, but something clearly went wrong. Some parts work, others don't, but the biggest issue? It bombed at the box office, so any talk of a sequel was dead on arrival.